man, I don't have my bell. It's in the car. Oh, well, just have to do it without it today. Um, I slept great, although I want to go back to sleep. I was more tired this morning than typical. I got up usually. I mean, I always get up at 5. I got up and I was just like, it's raining. I think I want to go right back to bed. So I got up. I went downstairs, let the dog out, and then uh, laid on the couch for a little while. But anyway, um, I hope this message finds you happy and well rested. Um, I hope you had a Veterans Day that lifted your spirits, gave you something that inspired you and captured your thoughts for at least a little while. Uh, we had an incredible honor quest. We had about 25 people. That was right around our expectations. We had set a goal of having 5 teams. We ended up having 7 teams. Everyone was able to easily engage with the QR code. I guess the only issue we had a little bit of an issue around posting video to Facebook pages. There was some confusion around that, but that got sorted. We ended up at the Capitol talking to 3 legislators, Dan Helmer, Syban Donovan, I think, State Senator Donovan, and then Delegate McGuire. We had some legislators show up on the Capitol to meet with the members of the Quest who participated. That was really cool. I think what really stood out for me on the call afterwards. So we awarded the prizes to the participants. So the prizes were pretty good. We had a $500 cash prize. We had a laptop, and we had a flag that had flown over the Capitol, and some other smaller prizes. But we handed out 4 prizes, and the people that won the prize for the $500 was a group of ROTC students from BCU, young warriors. Oh man, they're a treasure. God, you just look at them, you watch them, you listen to their thoughts and their hopes and their desires, and you're just like, these young people are going off to be officers in our military. I mean, gosh, it's just the best feeling in the world to interact with them, to kind of be a veteran, to have them look up to you, but then you say, look, you're going to be this, this, and we have this relationship, and mentally, physically, spiritually. That was just so cool. What really stood out for me, and this will get to today's topic, defeating our enemies, was how afraid several people described how several people describe being afraid to engage with some of the content that we encourage people to engage with during the quest. And most of the content was centered around the Civil War in and around Richmond. There was three sites that had to do with the Civil War. One was post 9/11, and one was essentially the future when we went to the Capitol. But we had several of the participants describe being anxious about going to the Civil War Museum and interacting with the topics that the Civil War was fought over, namely white supremacy, racism, and how do we, and slavery. How do we engage with that? And there was some fear about just engaging. And what these individuals described after they had gone into the Civil War Museum was just a sense of awe. They were like, I went in, I was a little, anxious about it, but I went in, and I mean, the second I was in there, I just got lost in it. And I got lost in the stories of the individuals. I didn't get lost in the who was right and who was wrong and this is who was this and this and that. They were just like, I just saw the human story. And these are all, these are veterans and young people. The young people, you got to go to Honor Quest, RVA Honor Quest Facebook page and check it out. The statements some of these people created, the content some people created that went up on the Facebook page, it just warms your heart. But it's just people being courageous and willing to speak back to stuff that has been used as weapons. We use language as a weapon, and we use stories as a weapon. And so, so much of what was at stake today um, is getting people past their stigmas and past their fears. And I, the stanza today is as follows. Even the most powerful human being has a limited sphere of strength. Draw him outside of that sphere and into your own, and his strength will dissipate. So again, I've shifted the art of peace from kind of the physical combat into kind of the intellect, not the intellectual, the physical combat, to the engagement with challenge just individually. And so kind of building off of this topic of the quest, I want to talk about what's the enemy of the mind, what's the enemy of the body, and what's the enemy of the spirit, and how do you draw those enemies out of their sphere of influence and into your sphere? How do you draw the enemy of your mind out of its sphere of influence and into your sphere of goodwill? How do you draw the enemy of your body out of your how do you draw the enemy of your body out of its sphere of influence and into your sphere? How do you develop the enemy of your spirit? How do you pull it out of the enemy out of its sphere and into your sphere? Your sphere. I'm a little tired today. So the enemy of the mind is a story. The story of this is the way it is, this is the way it's going to be, and anything outside of that's wrong. That's the enemy of the mind. And the enemy of the mind is destroyed every time by dialogue. And dialogue is back and forth for the sake of back and forth. It's not back and forth for the sake of winning. It's not argument. It's dialogue. And the goal of dialogue is more dialogue. That's it. That's the goal of dialogue. And so when you get into a place like the Civil War, there's so much around the Civil War that there's a fear associated with engaging with the Civil War, because what if the story I hear or the engagement of Civil War makes me not believe what I've always believed, right? What if I go and I interact with the history of the Civil War and I believe more strongly in one way or another, or what if I go and interact with Civil War and it's really about state rights and not slavery, or some kind of analysis or something like that. That's the enemy of the mind. The enemy of the mind is a story that's a still story. It's the enemy of the mind. So what the American Civil War Museum does at Tredegar Ironworks by Bell Island at downtown Richmond is it creates a dialogue, and it creates a dialogue around Black, white, Northern, and Confederate participation in the Civil War. And it talks about what the Civil War was actually about. It doesn't make a claim about the winners or the losers. It just talks about what it's about, and it gives the whole picture. What destroys the enemy of the mind is the whole picture. Because once you start to interact with the whole picture, the little story that you have in your mind, or the kind of the smaller narrative that you have in your mind, can't hold up. It just can't. And so that's how you defeat the enemy of the mind. You take the enemy of the mind, you take the kind of the stable, still story, which can become the enemy of the mind, and you engage it in dialogue. And all of a sudden that story becomes out of its sphere of influence, because typically that little story is just in your head, and you're not engaged with it, but it's still there, right? And it triggers a stigma, And so you don't move into a place because you've got that little stigma there. We know this with PTSD and mental health, and stigma's there. I'm just not going to make that extra effort. Well, you create an environment for the extra effort to happen, and then you move into the whole narrative. Once you get into the whole narrative, the sides of the little stable story is seen in relation to the larger story, and it's seen for its true size. It's just little. So that's how you take the enemy of the mind out of its sphere of influence. Now, the enemy of the body is kind of on a pendulum. One aspect of the enemy of the body is that the body can get kind of stuck. It can get stuck in patterns, and it can get stuck in what it's used to, and it because the brain and the brain body, right? The brain body, what the body does on a regular basis becomes habituated. Whatever you do regularly, your brain actually wires itself so that whatever you're doing regularly becomes easier and easier to do, and it becomes habit. And so it becomes just this way of doing things. And so the enemy of the body is habit. And so the way you break the enemy of the body, the way you break the habit, is you do things that you wouldn't typically do. And you do things outside of your comfort zone. You do things on the other side of the edge. So what really challenges the enemy of the body, what pulls the power of the enemy out of its sphere of effectiveness, is novelty. And novelty with the body is engagement outside of your comfort zone. And that just scrambles things. It scrambles habits. It scrambles ways of doing things. It scrambles the way the body actually processes itself. So you get out of the comfort zone and into something hard. And people know this. People talk about this all the time. But the key thing to keep in mind is that you need to be able to do that for your whole life. So it's not just, get out of your comfort zone, do something hard, do something badass. It's get out of your comfort zone at the edge of ease. So if here's your comfort zone, okay, and you're working, thinking about this for the rest of your life. If this is your comfort zone, you want to get right on the other side of it. So you want to get just outside of it. You don't want to get all the way over here in order to kind of bust through the zone, because you can't keep doing that. You can do that for a little while, but you can't do that in your 60s. You can't do that in the 70s. You can't do that in the 80s for most people. So what you want to be thinking about is, what's the edge of ease? What's the outside edge of my comfort zone? And yesterday's honor quest fit that well, in that we asked people to walk. We asked people to walk about 2 miles, but it was raining. It was dreary. It wasn't like a perfect environment, but people did it. And that was a very positive thing, getting people kind of just outside their comfort zone. And that just messes things up in terms of like the enemy of the body, kind of just like being addicted to something or a particular habit. Now, this last piece, and then we'll get into the training, and this part really showed up for me while on the steps of the Capitol, and that is the enemy of the spirit. So I think the enemy of the spirit is a sense of, how do I say this? So I got a call while on the Capitol from a veteran who I've worked with for a long time, dear friend, and he called me up and they said, I'm really in a bad way, X, Y, and Z. What do you think I should do? And I said, well, what's going on? He said, well, mostly I'm just, maybe I just feel like I need permission, but I think I should go to the VA. And I said, yeah, of course. That's a great idea. Get surrounded by the goodwill there, and get things evened out a little bit. Absolutely. And so as I was thinking, we talked later on in the day, and I said, what, are you getting in your training? Are you still exercising? He's like, yeah, I'm still exercising. I'm practicing mindfulness. And I said, man. So I was like, well, we got to strategize. So we're going to talk today and strategize. I've been thinking about that. Like, what's the problem here? And so he described he described a engagement with the latest kind of happenings in the United States around the election, around the fate of the nation, hope for the nation, et cetera, et cetera. And what he described was ultimately being worn down by the uncertainty. And I was thinking about that. What's that? And so I started thinking, what's the enemy of the spirit? And the enemy of the spirit is a kind of a nihilism. The enemy of the spirit is there's nothing to believe in. The enemy of the spirit is what you did believe in is crap, and there is nothing to believe in. And I think the way you get out of the comfort zone of the way you get out of the sphere of influence of the enemy of the spirit is, I think it's charitable work. Or it's not necessarily charitable work, but it's work outside yourself. And I think that was what we talked a lot about with honor. Because you don't accumulate honor by going to get it. You don't get honor. Honor evolves inside of you as you give honor. And so what I'm gonna talk to this guy about today is we're gonna strategize, and I'm gonna try to frame the conversation around the enemy of his mind. He seems to be handling that in terms of his mindfulness trainings, working with his attention. Enemy of the body is kind of just being stuck in a habit. And he's working out, but the enemy of the spirit is really becoming focused from your own perspective on kind of the future from your own perspective. What's the future going to be like? And you imagine it from your own perspective. And I think what you have to do is you have to get out of your thinking about yourself and what happens with yourself, and into, how do I support honoring others, and how do I support bringing the best out of other people. And I think that's so much what church has done in the past. It's so much what charity work is. It's so much what I do in my outreach work in terms of the Mindful Memorial Day, now the Honor Quest, finding ways to support other people. So compassion. So I think compassion really is partly what takes the enemy of the spirit out of its sphere of influence. Because everything has a sphere of influence, and there's always an outer edge to it. And in battle, in actual fight, you can kind of see that kind of quickly, right? You see when someone's attacking you, you can step and move and adjust, and it's happening right now. But in the realm of mental, physical, and spiritual health, it's harder to see. So that's what I hope to have kind of elucidated for you a little bit. Instead, my head still feels kind of like, I still feel very like sluggish and tired. My mind doesn't feel too fast. So, and I don't have my bell. So we're just gonna do, we'll do 4 bells notionally, and then I'm gonna drink some coffee and start the day, and maybe I'm probably gonna take my nap maybe a little bit early today. Anyway, without a bell, it has to be notional. So it's easily done, no problem. So because my eyes are so tired, I'm just going to keep them closed. Get yourself set. All right, first things first, go ahead and notice whatever's showing up sensationally. Sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. Just settle in there. And from there, move into the body, starting at the ground. Notice what's beneath you. Move into the pelvis, and feel free to move around a little bit. Remember, it's a dialogue. You know, you're interacting for the sake of interacting. Core. Heart space. Throat. Top of the head. And full breath. Sit for a minute. Just breathe evenly. And now's the time to think about what you're grateful for. Think about sharing some of that gratitude with others who are struggling in any way, form, or fashion. And then be sure to be conscious about the end. So, say to yourself, okay, I'm going to take 2 breaths, and on the second exhale, you'll be done. It's different without the bells. Oh, man. I feel like my face is just. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. I'll be here, of course, tomorrow. And hopefully, I'll have a little bit more pep in my step. Um, yeah. But thanks for paying attention today. Thanks for participating. Always a pleasure. And we'll see you tomorrow. We're down. Later.